Demon's Redemption by Timothy Masters and Tracy Marcoux. Narrated by Johanna Masters.
Chapter 1. Mommy, look! Come on, hurry! There's a giant green butterfly trying to get in! Belliana wiggled her antenna in concern as the boy pointed at her, shouting for his mother. Only an ancient battered screen door separated them. She loosened her grip on the wire mesh, ready to swoop off into the night if it came to that. A young woman holding a dripping pan in one hand and a dish towel in the other appeared from a nearby room and knelt down beside the child. "It's a Luna moth," she said, grabbing his wrist just as he reached out to poke at the screen. "Isn't it beautiful?" Belliana stretched luxuriously, pulling her wings far behind her slim body, and let go, taking to the cool night air with long, slow sweeps. She turned a circle, saw the mother and child watching wide-eyed, and gave them a graceful dip before heading toward the forest. The moon was so bright that she caught glimpses of her shadow skimming across the ground. The warm but not yet muggy air made for one of those delicious summer evenings that demand adventure. So when she reached the brook that bordered the forest, instead of crossing it, she turned downstream and flitted above the shimmering water, watching her reflection dance in every ripple. The swamp critters were coming to life, calling one another to meet and greet and make new swamp life. She passed over a particularly large and ugly toad and circled back for a closer look. This was no ordinary toad. It was ancient, misshapen, with one crooked leg, a twisted head, and huge gray warts covering its back. It glanced up at her as she dipped low and let out a pathetic "Harumph!" She stopped in mid-flight and landed on a clump of marsh grass. "Is that you, Malarak?" The toad harumphed again and lowered its head until its chin touched the wet ground. "Come on, talk to me. What's up?" The toad rocked from side to side, pushing with its good leg, turning away. She glanced around, sniffing the air. Another toad, smaller and healthier looking, sat on a tiny island a few feet away. After making sure no owl or other terrible beast was watching, she leapt out of the Luna moth and into the young toad. The moth paused a few seconds before taking to the sky. Belliana flexed her new muscles, getting a feel for the toad's body while she studied her friend. Malarak seemed oblivious to the world. She slipped into the shallow water, swam silently until she was behind the old toad, and jumped, landing on top of the warty creature. Hooking her back legs under his behind, she tucked her head down and rolled into the water, dragging him along in a ball of flailing limbs. A few powerful kicks brought them to shore. "That'll teach you to ignore me," she said, snorting water out of her nose. He didn't answer, didn't pounce on her in retaliation, didn't scream, didn't laugh, didn't do anything but sit motionless, his eyes cast down. A mosquito buzzed past, and before she knew what was happening, her tongue shot out, wrapped itself around the tiny insect, and pulled it into her mouth. She swallowed fast so she wouldn't have to taste it, and sidled up to Malarak. "Come on, what's wrong?" she asked, rubbing her head against his. A sack beneath his chin blew itself up to enormous proportions and then collapsed, rending the air with a mighty croak that set 100 other toads in the swamp trying to match it. "You wouldn't understand. You angels have no idea." "And you demons have too many ideas. That's your problem. Trust me, Malarak, you don't need to plot and plan everything you do. Just take what comes along and be happy. Life's a lot better that way." "Easy for you to say. You angels, you get everything handed to you on a silver platter. But us, we got to work for every damn thing in our lives. Nothing comes free and nothing's easy." A fat mosquito drifted past, so heavy that its wildly beating wings barely kept it in the air, and Malarak's tongue zapped it. His jaw worked, and he shook his head in disgust. Bloody beast! It just ate. I hate it when they just ate. Skunk, I think. Yeah. Poor you. I know the story. Just because you were born a demon, you think the whole universe is out to get you. That's rubbish. And enough with the silver platter stuff already. I've been an angel for 5,000 years, and I've never even seen a silver platter. I don't fit in with high society. But quit changing the subject. What's with you? She followed his upward gaze and saw a great horned owl watching them with hunger in its eyes. She was about to plunge into the swamp for cover when the owl's expression suddenly changed. Its head drooped, and it blinked its eyes as if fighting back tears. After a few somber seconds, it spread its wings and circled to the ground, stopping in front of her, while the ancient toad that had hosted Malarak a moment ago gave a terrified croak and hopped into the water. "That's better," she said to the owl. "Nothing personal, Malarak, but I never did understand why you take up residence in toads. They're ugly as sin, and besides, flies and mosquitoes taste awful." The owl cocked its head to the side. "Let me tell you, mice are no better. Now leave me alone. I don't feel like talking." "That's too bad. You're going to talk to me anyway. What happened?" The owl hung his head for a minute before whispering, "I got a warning from on high. I must have made somebody important mad, because a prissy little angel, who couldn't have been more than 100 years old, just told me that what I did last week was going to cost me. Now the room they have reserved for me is 2 levels deeper. Damn!" "What?" Beliana hopped back a step. Even though her friend was in control of the owl for the moment, being so close to that enormous curved beak would make anyone nervous. She met his sad gaze. "Malarak, you've been good lately. You were almost out of hell and up into purgatory. What did you do that was so bad?" Swiveling his head from side to side, he looked everywhere but at her. "Well?" "Not telling. It must have been really bad, though, so I guess I'm ashamed. Why do you even like me? Angels aren't supposed to like demons. Not good angels, anyway." She almost told him the truth, that befriending demons earned angels extra points, and their long relationship had already built up an enviable stash in her celestial account. But she stopped herself just in time. He wouldn't understand. No demon would. Besides, she wasn't doing it for the points. She really liked him. Even though he was a demon, he had good intentions, mostly. And he was far from the worst. She'd met countless demons she could never be friends with. "I know what I'm going to do, though. I can redeem my bad thing. I've got a plan." She tried to stop the muscle spasm that started deep in her gut, but an impertinent croak escaped her throat anyway. "You don't believe me?" "Oh, I believe you all right, Malarak. You just don't get it. Every time you come up with a plan, it goes wrong. I've seen it 100 times. I know you can't help it. It's a demon thing. But you've got to try. Stop planning. Just hang out. Let life come to you. I bet if you can stay out of trouble, you'll make purgatory in a couple 100 years tops. So forget your plan. It'll only get you in deeper." "You haven't even heard it." "I don't want to hear it." The owl's head turned around until it was pointing straight backwards. "Look," he said, "there's 2 otters peeking out a hole in the bank. Let's go where we can have some privacy." Meliana stared at the owl, who peered back down at her with suddenly renewed interest. Its beak opened wide. She leapt into the water just as it pounced. Swimming frantically to the deepest part of the stream, she held still until she was sure the owl was not following with outstretched talons. Satisfied, she left the toad and found the otters Malarak had discovered. "Sorry about that," he said when she joined him. "Like hell you are." I swear." He slid his soft, furry body against hers, rubbing back and forth until the electricity building between them crackled and made their whiskers twitch. "Ready?" he asked. She noted the way those beady little eyes were ogling her sleek body. Snuggling was fine, but an angel has her limits. With a sigh, she turned so her butt hugged the wall. Malarac knew very well that jumping on her back and humping would be a grave breach of etiquette. But even the nicest demons can't always control their basic nature. "Ready? Ready for what?" she said. "To hear my plan." Chapter 2. Malarac curled around her warm, furry body, wondering if she felt the same way he did. These jumps from being to being were becoming an easy skill of late, one he needed in order to redeem his dark ways, to become what he hoped Beliana would see as something other than demonic and evil. "I think you should forget your plan," she snipped, and nuzzled his face with a twitching nose. His heart thrummed faster. "But you haven't even heard it yet." "Oh, very well. Spit it out, and I'll still tell you no." He drew in a breath, tasting the musky scent of her skin and the softer, dreamy flavor hidden in her essence, the hint of her true nature. It lured him like nothing else. An angel, his angel. He wanted to be her equal, to have her favor him as something more than just a friend. He wanted to be more than a hapless demon born into the degradation of hell, a poor soul she spent time with only because she pitied him. His plan centered on such a grand idea, but he couldn't tell her that. Expelling his breath and his anxiety, Malarac spoke. "You know the woman and child you're assigned to, just down the other side of the swamp?" "Yes. Have you done something to her? I was just—" "No," he sighed in an animalistic way when her body tensed. No, I would never hurt them. I know you favor them. Besides, my assignments are elsewhere." He didn't mention that the convent and his drudgery work there, tempting those with unbreakable faith, bored him silly. "What about them, then?" "Well, the child. I know he's yours to watch over. Don't you think it would be best if his real father claimed him? Better than that wretch his mother married to avoid being the laughingstock. I mean, really, she is the preacher's daughter. She only married him because she didn't want to embarrass her family." "I know why she did it." Her soft outer eyes became wistful. She rested her head on Malarac's long neck. He wondered if the woman's predicament made his old friend sad. What would it be like to feel such things? "You've been inside her body, haven't you?" he pressed. For the idea to work, he needed her concession, her full commitment to the plan. He needed her to be able to possess a human, if only for a little while. "Many times, even though I shouldn't. She cries every night after her husband falls asleep." Sucking in a breath, Beliana stopped herself from continuing, and Malarac knew his plan stood a chance. Her silence did no good. He was well aware that she knew everything about Mary Parker and her son. The angel went over there too often. Not that he knew the exact rules of what guardians should provide in the way of watchfulness, but her spying seemed overdone by demon-taunting standards. Either that, or he slacked off too much. "So we set things right. That's my plan." "We?" She jumped back, startled. The yips of otter kits further in the burrow broke the otherwise peaceful silence. "Yes, we." The gloom of his reality settled in once more when she left his closeness. She would deny him. She would never speak to him again. This would be the time she snubbed him and told him they couldn't meet any more. He looked out at the dark night and wondered if he ought to go back to his moping, or better yet, back to his job at the convent. He didn't much like his job, though. Tormenting nuns had gotten old years ago. Eliana sniffed, curled in on herself, and pawed at her belly. "Oh, the babies are hungry." She glanced at him in a shy way. "Maybe we should find another pair of hosts." "That's the plan," he said, and winked. "I don't know." She shook her head and scampered into the burrow. Moments later, a black stink beetle plodded along. It paused, regarding him with shiny onyx eyes. "I can't interfere, not like that. It's against the rules." 6 spindly legs carried her away. He sighed, watching her go. Melarac couldn't explain why he felt such fondness for the angel. If the other demons knew, they'd ostracize him. "Nuns must be getting to me," he muttered, pawing at the ground with his claws. "I'll start it," he whispered to himself. "She'll see in time it's the right thing. Belliana won't be able to resist helping." He closed his eyes and concentrated, parting his essence from the otter. Floating over the forest floor, he mingled with the light fog that drifted in the evenings. He arrived at the house hours before dawn, passed through the thin screen, slipped beneath the wooden door, and drifted to the bed where Mary slept alone. She breathed slowly, lost in dreams he couldn't see. Only nightmares would give him cause to notice the workings of her mind. Easing into her aura, he experienced a fleeting moment of doubt, but it fled when his soul pushed hers aside. She resisted his control, her will a small thing pressing him away. He ignored her and forced his mind inside. He opened his new eyes, thrust back the covers, and studied the curves of Mary Parker's shape. The thin nightgown she wore barely kept the chilly air at bay. Goosebumps prickled her skin, her body shivered. Melarac noticed that one of the buttons had come undone and pushed it in place. Standing, he yanked the cover from the bed and draped it over her shoulders to keep warm. Soon, Mary's drunken husband would return. It was time to bring this relationship to an end. He left the bedroom and sat Mary at the kitchen table, planning an argument. The first hint of a rosy dawn shone through the window before Mary's husband staggered in. He hulked past his wife as if he didn't notice her. Maybe he didn't, but the demon would not be ignored. "Enough," Melarac said, astounded at how weak and subservient Mary's voice sounded. "Enough, Harold!" she shrieked. Her husband spun around, grasped the counter by the doorway to the hall, and snapped back. "Enough what?" Melarac stood and crossed the room, stomping as best she could, being barefoot and shivering. "Enough of you out drinking all the time! Enough of you hobbling in here in the wee hours of the morning!" Curling her fingers into a fist, he raised it, ready to strike. "What nonsense is this?" the man slurred. "I have a child to care for, a son who needs a father in his life, not a drunkard." Harold's bushy brows pinched together as he scratched the side of his head. "What's come over you, Mary? It's poker night." "Out!" She slugged his shoulder. He winced, edging away, back to the door. He turned the knob and opened it. "Get out!" Melarac liked the sound of her voice now, furious, dangerous, the voice of a succubus who'd been jilted. She slung another punch at the man's chest. Harold fell backward, crashing through the screen. The wood frame splintered. He lay splayed on the ground, muttering over this turn of events. A child's voice interrupted the battle just before Melarac had a chance to shout obscenities. "Mama?" Eric's face peered from the hall, his eyes wide, fingers gripping the corner of the wall. "What's wrong with Papa?" "He's not your father," Melarac raged. "That's what's wrong with him." The boy frowned. His brows creased, and he opened his mouth to speak, but snapped it shut soon after. Mary's husband rose and stumbled away into the night. Cold air rushed in. The demon slammed the wooden door. Melarac spun to face Mary's son, unsure of how to deal with him, not being the maternal sort. "Go to bed." "Are you sure you want him to go away, Mama?" He's gone. It's done. Malorek scowled. Now, no more questions. Go to bed, I said. You have school tomorrow. Eric sighed. Malorek groaned. Can I sleep with you? The child asked. The demon threw up her hands. Fine. He returned to the bedroom, flopped on the icy mattress, and held Mary's breath when her son climbed up beside her. The little human smelled like soap. His soft hair caught the first rays of dawn spilling through the cracked bedside window. Malorek patted Eric's head a few times in a lame attempt to calm him. Go to sleep, he ordered, rethinking his plot. The child could be a problem, but he couldn't think of any other way to show Biljana that he could do good things. Malorek didn't know whether he really regretted what he'd done, but he did feel something, a bitter burning in the pit of Mary's stomach, as if she'd eaten something rotten. She rolled over so her back faced the child and forced her eyes to close. Maybe Biljana is right, he thought. Maybe I plan things out too much. Chapter 3. Biljana backed her little beetle body under a rock that jutted out of the burrow's wall. It felt good. Cool, dark, and damp made a perfect match for her mood. Malorek worried her. He wasn't all that bad as demons go, and she almost never resented her self-imposed task of guiding him toward the light. Sometimes he even seemed eager to follow her suggestions, as if the thought of redemption pleased him more than whatever joy he got out of leaving bodice rippers under nuns' pillows or littering their vegetable garden with centerfolds torn out of Playgirl magazines. No, he wasn't beyond hope, because somewhere under his demonic shell beat the heart of an angel. She caught a glimpse of it every now and then, at times when he acted like he truly wanted to be good. It was just that all his instincts were wrong. He'd been brought up surrounded by bad influences. Hell was no place to raise a spirit child, and she'd have to be patient, content to peel away his wrong thoughts one at a time. His latest idea was the scariest she'd heard in decades, not only because it sounded dangerous for him, but also because it hit too close to home. Mary Parker was special. Biljana usually tried to keep a certain distance from her assignments. Like any decent guardian angel, she followed orders, did her best to care for her charge, and then moved on, with neither pride nor regret when the time came. The key was to avoid personal involvement. Getting too close to a client risked making bad decisions, acting on emotion rather than reason. She knew the principle well, but she still let it slide for Mary. That poor woman was in a sorry state, worse off even than people she'd watched over as they died of gruesome diseases, struggled in abject poverty, or battled devastating addictions. For Mary's problems were not cast on her by fate. They were of her own making, and they spilled over to her son, Eric, a fact that never ceased tormenting her soul. Bad choices, Biljana muttered to the darkness as she snuggled against the damp wall. How many people's lives were ruined by bad choices? Mary Parker had made a big one the night of her 19th birthday. She had celebrated the day before by visiting a home improvement store, having them custom mix the most nauseating shade of pinkish-purple wall paint that she could conjure, and then painting the ceiling and all 4 walls of her bedroom. Actually, the room was in the top floor of her parents' house, which made it theirs, not Mary's. But they let her live with them because, as they were fond of pointing out, they needed to take care of her since she was quite incapable of taking care of herself. The paint was an act of sheer defiance, a proclamation of her independence, done with the hope that it would wake something in her mother or father, rouse any sort of emotion at all. Even anger would have been welcome. But the plan failed. The morning of the special day, when she invited them up for a surprise, they simply looked at the walls, looked at each other, shook their heads, and left the room without as much as wishing her a happy birthday. Mary watched them descend the stairs in silence, knowing then that she needed to go a lot further than purple paint if they were to ever admit she was a real person. So that night she got pregnant. Belliana lifted one of her front legs to her head and scrubbed her carapace, dislodging the grains of hardened beetle juice, whose pungent odor made her eyes water. She'd have to leave this body soon, because its owner was growing restless. She couldn't keep a host in submission for long before rebellion set in. Even a stink beetle knew when something was tampering with its mind, and it would not suffer the indignity for long before raising a fuss. Yet her dark corner under a rock was a delightful refuge from the reality she would soon have to face with Malarac and his misguided intentions. The situation was so complicated. Sam, the young man with whom Mary had chosen to share her maternal bad choice, was a sweet innocent, taken by surprise that fateful night and undeserving of the consequences. For the most part, he no longer belonged in the drama, being merely a hapless passer-by who, after playing his brief role, was left to wander away from the stage alone. But the fact that everyone else had forgotten him made Belliana care for him all the more. If Malarac hurt him, he'd have hell to pay. Most of what Belliana knew of Sam was gleaned from occasional lines that Mary wrote in her diary. It was obvious that even after 7 years, she still felt horrific guilt over what she'd done, and she had fond memories of him, maybe even loved him. She had known exactly who it would be when she set off that hot summer night of her birthday. A thunderstorm struck before she'd walked a mile, and by the time she reached the farm where Sam lived with his widowed mother, the rain had drenched her to the bone. She pounded on their door, and when he answered, she told him her car had a flat tire. But instead of leading him to the road, she dragged him through the storm to the shelter of their barn. The deed was done in 10 minutes, and the two amateurs made such clumsy work of it that she wondered if it would take. Arranging to try again another night might lead to awkward complications best avoided. She understood rebelling against her parents. Admitting that she'd secretly loved Sam for a year was another thing entirely, beyond what she was ready to handle right then. She needn't have worried about it taking, though, for once proved to be enough. 2 months later, after vomiting several mornings in a row, she announced the happy news to her parents. It was all for naught. Her desperate scheme to shake their world, to force them to notice her at last, fell to pieces when they simply sighed and retreated to their bedroom, where they spent the next hour speaking so softly that Mary couldn't understand a word of it, even with her ear pressed to the keyhole. When they emerged, they issued their edict with quiet resolve. Tomorrow they would consult Frank Gibbons, a longtime friend of the family who also happened to own 2 car dealerships and generously supported her father's church. Father went through the steps like he was crossing items off a checklist. Frank's son, Harold, was unmarried. Check. Frank would see it as a matter of great prestige if his son married the vicar's daughter. Check. Frank wasn't fond of his son's wandering ways and would be happy to see him married and settle down. Check. Frank might even be willing to provide some persuasive monetary inducements to Harold. Check. Mary was in no position to argue. Check. The deal would be sealed by evening. And none too soon, Mother admonished, for although wagging tongues might gossip that the baby wasn't born quite far enough into wedlock, at least their family would be spared the shame of it being born entirely out of wedlock. Belliana had received her assignment that day. She would watch over Mary Parker until the girl's life fell into place, however long that might be. and what an assignment it had turned into. With the first touch of spirit to human essence, the angel knew she could never build the traditional wall between herself and her charge. Mary's soul was much too fragile for that approach. The girl needed more than just nudges toward the right decisions and little spurts of good fortune to smooth her way in life. No, this girl needed to be rebuilt from the inside out and with perfect care. The first time Biljana had stroked the girl's mind, she had felt like she was holding a crystal goblet, a piece of great beauty that would shatter with one wrong move. Thus the guardian angel trod lightly. She'd flown beside Mary as a moth the night before the wedding, traveling down the road to Sam's farm at midnight. She beat Mary to the house, roused the young man from his sleep, and gave him the urge to walk to the door and open it, just as Mary came up the path. She'd been an owl perched in a branch outside the door when Mary told him that he would soon be a father, but would have to watch his child be raised by another man. She'd even taken the bold step of slipping into Mary's mind when Sam cried, promising to love her and begging her to reconsider. The torment swirling in the poor girl's mind had tempted the angel to interfere, even though she had strict orders to stay out of the decision. It was pain she'd never forget. The girl had shown resolve, though, and accepted her fate as if it were righteous punishment for what she'd done. It hadn't occurred to her at the time that she was punishing poor Sam as much as she was punishing herself, though the thought did hit her later, adding to the mountain of guilt already built up inside. She left him with one small consolation, though, an act that might have caused more pain than pleasure. When he reached out his finger to touch her face, she drew him to her and kissed him, hesitantly at first, but growing until it ended with a fiery, almost violent passion that left her lips bleeding. She suddenly pushed him away and turned her back on him, shaking. When he whispered her name, she dashed to the road and ran all the way home, sneaking in the back door. Biljana had stayed in Mary's mind all that night, caressing, soothing the pain, and bringing sleep. She didn't try to hide her presence. Mary knew another being was with her, but she wasn't afraid. She accepted the angel, welcoming her touch without question, as if being visited by an angel were a perfectly natural occurrence. Only when the girl nodded off into dreamless slumber did the angel leave her mind. That night had been 7 years ago, yet as Biljana hid under her rock, studiously cleaning her carapace, the memories were as clear as if they'd happened the day before, and they still made her sad. Harold Gibbons had turned out to be a mixed blessing, a good provider in the material sense, but worthless in every other way. His money, or rather his father's money, put a decent roof over their heads and adequate food on the table, but Harold was lazy, prone to drink, and utterly without care for either his wife or the child that he knew all too well was the fruit of another man. Probably the only reason he stayed with them was because it ensured a steady supply of funds from his father. Biljana felt the beetle's growing restlessness and knew she had to leave her refuge soon, but nothing was settled yet. What did Malarak have in mind? It finally occurred to her that the reason she was still hiding under a rock was that she couldn't bring herself to face the task that lay before her, the job of once again saving the demon from himself. She hoped Mary and Eric wouldn't get caught in the crossfire, or Sam, for that matter. Mary was stronger now than she had ever been, and the ineffective rebellious streak that had brought on purple paint and pregnancy was finally solidifying into a solid, fierce determination to take charge of her life once and for all. The girl was making progress, but if Malarak started meddling in her life, it could all be lost. And what if he tried to touch her mind? God help her! She could never handle a demon in her head. Biljana suddenly reared back and smacked her front legs together. He wouldn't, would he? Touch her mind? Maybe venture inside? No! She scurried out of the den, flashed out of the beetle body, and scanned the sky. The eyes of a hawk perched in a nearby branch followed the beetle as it rushed back to the dark tunnel. Not bothering to be gentle, she plunged into the bird and flew toward Mary's house as fast as the creature's wings would beat. 10 minutes later, she landed on the ledge of an open window and ducked inside. Mother and child lay in bed, sound asleep, but she felt the demon's presence. He was here. "Malarac!" The name left her beak as a hoarse croak. The woman stirred and opened her eyes. "Beliana," she whispered. Beliana stretched her wings out and brought them down with a loud flap. You demon! You get out of her, now!" Mary shook her head from side to side. "No, Malarac, I'm not kidding. Leave that woman." Mary licked her lips. "I can't. I think I'm stuck." Chapter 4. Stuck. The hawk's feathers ruffled, puffing its body wide. Malarac sighed, stretched Mary's arms high, and yawned. "It's not a big deal. Don't get all in a tizzy like you do." He slipped from the bed and glanced at the sleeping child. "Let me get the kid to the bus first." The hawk groaned, a screechy sound unbecoming a bird of prey, and ducked behind a coat rack. Malarac gripped Eric's shoulder and shook him awake. "Time to get ready for school," she shouted. The boy blinked, his mouth agape. "Don't just lie there. Get up. I have things to do today, and I can't have some kid hanging around pretending to be sick so he doesn't have to learn, well, whatever it is you learn at school." Eric's brown eyebrows tensed and knitted. He started to speak, but snapped his mouth shut with a squeak. "Okay, Mom." He rolled off the bed and shuffled down the hall to his bedroom. "See?" Malarac grinned when the hawk came bumbling out of the coats. "Nothing to this parenthood thing." He placed both hands on her hips. "Maybe one day I'll have a few demon kits of my own." "You get out of her now! You'll ruin everything!" The hawk flew across the bedroom to land at the dresser. "And where's her husband?" He looked away and began rifling through the closet for fresh clothes. "Well, where is he? He should be here in that bed, snoring." Malarac unbuttoned the nightgown and tugged it off. He tossed a red dress across the foot of the bed and pulled open a dresser drawer. Snatching out a bra, he fed the harness over her arms and stared down at the cups, confused as to how the whole contraption went on. "I don't know where he is." "What did you do?" The demon attempted to hook the bra clasps, gave up, and tossed the damnable thing across the room. "He's a loser, and you know it. It's not like she loves him. It's not like he makes her happy." Shooting Beliana his best sad puppy dog face, as well as he could in a woman's body, he hoped she'd understand. "I'm going to find him. I'll bring him back here, and when I do, you better be gone. There are some things we're not allowed to mess with, and what you've done—" Malarac sniffed and pulled the red dress on, dismissing Beliana. He posed in front of the mirror, hands on hips, twisting from side to side. "Doesn't look right," he muttered, ignoring the angel and focusing on the woman's chest. "Of course it doesn't. You haven't got a bra on." "Shh, you'll scare my son." He chuckled and pulled a shawl over her shoulders, tying it across Mary's chest to hide his inabilities. "This'll do well enough to get the boy out of here." "And then what?" The hawk's tail fanned. She clawed gouges into the surface of the dresser. "Then I pay an old friend a visit." "You wouldn't dare!" Mary's hand patted the bird's head in a clumsy fashion. "It's going to work out fine. You'll see. I know what I'm doing." He pushed her feet into a pair of worn-out house slippers and padded to the kitchen. Inside the fridge, Melorek found a carton of eggs with 3 left and a loaf of bread. He set a pan on the stove and turned the heat on. "Eric, you have to eat, okay?" "Yes, Mom." The boy appeared in the kitchen, all dressed for school with a backpack on his shoulders. His hair stood up at the back of his head, knotted from sleep. The demon frowned. "Fix your hair." "Aw, Mom." Eric scraped his fingers through the knots, making it worse. The boy's hair still stuck up. The demon reached over to the knife block and got a pair of black-handled utility scissors. "Here, let me fix that for you." Eric took a step backward. "No, that's okay. I'll put some water on it." He dashed into the hall. Water ran in the bathroom sink, and the demon frowned. He poked her head into the bedroom, but Beliana wasn't there. Shrugging, he went to hover over the stove and cook the eggs. The shawl she had on got caught in the burner and started to smoke. Growling, the demon tugged the garment free and tossed it on the floor to stomp out the flame that had started. He went back to the eggs. They stuck to the pan and turned a pleasing shade of brown with wrinkles in all the right places. Melorek folded them with a spatula and slapped them on a piece of bread. He set the breakfast on a plate and placed it on the table for the boy. "Come eat." Eric returned, his hair plastered to his head. He grimaced at the food, but ate without complaint. When he'd cleared his plate, the demon made him carry it to the sink. "Now then, let's get you to the bus stop." The boy stood and stared at Mary's chest. Melorek gripped the child's head and turned it to face the door. "Hurry up! I have things to do." They crossed the patchy lawn to the corner where they waited. The demon knew the bus came by this way because he'd watched Beliana hovering over the boy many times in many different shapes. He began to wonder why she'd never gone and fixed things right. "Angels," he muttered. "Too cautious all the time." "What's that, Mom?" "Nothing." The bus pulled up with a screech. When the door opened, the driver eyed Mary with his mouth wide open. "Have a good day. Learn and don't fight." He gave the child a shove and waited for the bus to pull away. Wriggling Mary's toes, Melorek decided he'd best just get this whole thing over with so Beliana could be impressed. She'd see how good he could be when he tried. Not that he tried often, but he wanted to see the angel happy with her warts. He walked along the sidewalk in the general direction he thought Sam lived in. Melorek couldn't be sure because Beliana didn't hang around there often. Mary's feet began to feel every niggling bit of gravel on the cement. Melorek frowned, but kept moving. It was early yet, and he doubted Sam would be gone to work. A crow cawed in a birch tree, and the demon cringed. He knew Beliana had pushed her way into the bird, and sure enough, the black bird swooped in Mary's path. "Where do you think you're going now?" "Not talking to you." He waved a hand at the bird. "Weren't you off looking for the loser husband? Go on and find him. Let him get a proper shock when he comes home." Melorek stopped at the corner of Peterson and Fifth and groaned, sniffing the air. "Ha!" cawed the crow as she perched on a mailbox. "You don't know the way." He scratched at the back of her head and tangled a fingernail there. "Well, Mary knows the way." Tugging her hand free, along with a few hairs, he went forth with his plan. "Don't you do it," the crow squawked. "Melorek, it's forbidden to interfere like this. Don't make contact with—" But her warning came too late. The demon coaxed out the sleeping soul who shared the body he had possessed. He closed her eyes, concentrating, and in no time woke Mary up. "Where's Sam's house?" he asked, getting straight to the point. "Left and 2 blocks down." Her mind voice sounded groggy. "Who are you?" "I'm your conscience. We're going to do what you should have done a long time ago." He waited for an angry response, but all he felt was confusion and a numb acceptance of his presence. Well, he remembered, Beliana said she'd shared Mary's mind before. Angel or demon, the woman would never notice the difference. Mary's silent voice cut in. Can you at least button up the dress? Bad enough we've no bra on. Malarac growled. Fumbling as he hurried her pace, he managed to close the dress all the way up. Feathers rustled behind him, but he didn't stop. Soon it would all be over. Everything would be set right, and Beliana would forgive him, accept him, see him for what he truly was. That one, Mary directed. Malarac took heed and marched his human host's body straight up the curving path to a red-painted door. Knock 5 times, she told him. Maybe he'll remember. The demon pounded on the door 5 times and regretted it, cupping Mary's now sore hand with her other one. Sorry, he muttered. A great scuffle went on within the house. Bumps and crashes preceded the opening of the door. A pair of deep brown eyes peered cautiously around the lip of it. Mary, is it really you? Malarac sighed, grasped the handle, and pulled the door wide open. I need to come in. There's a lot I have to say. He gave Sam a shove. His tie wasn't even done up yet, and his collar needed buttoning. The man stumbled backward, only to brace himself at the last moment against the couch. Sit down, Malarac ordered. Don't be so rude, Mary warned. Shut up, the demon hissed to silence her. Sam sat on the couch, looking terrified. My kid is your kid too, so you need to marry me and come home and be his father. Got it? The man on the couch gasped. He ran a hand half through his hair and froze. What did you just say? You heard me. My husband is a loser, and I kicked him out. I've loved you ever since well, you know what it was we did. He planted her hands on her hips, flustered. Oh, Mary, Sam began. Why didn't you tell me? The demon wanted to slap him silly. Humans always wasted time. What do you mean, why didn't I tell you? You think I had a choice in the matter? My parents forced me into the marriage. She waggled her finger in front of his face as Beliana came flying into the house. Claws scratched across Mary's arm, sending Malarac backing away. Should have closed the door, he grumbled. Great, just great. Sam jumped up and snatched a newspaper from the coffee table. He swung it at the bird, missed, and swung again. The paper hit its mark, and the crow flew sideways, smacked a picture hanging on the wall, and dropped to the floor. Shards of broken glass fell on the unconscious bird, while the frame swung back and forth on its hook. What did you just do? Malarac shrieked and shoved Sam away when he bent over the crow. You've knocked her out. Now I'm in trouble. She scooped up the stunned creature in both hands and cradled her to Mary's chest. Beliana, wake up, he cried. Sam will think I'm off my rocker now for sure, Mary said in their shared mind. You're ruining everything. What's the matter with you? Get out of my head. A tingle buzzed through Mary's body. The demon patted the crow's head, ignoring Mary's attempt to push him out. I'm sorry, Sam burbled. 2 warm hands rested over Mary's shoulders. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to abandon you. I didn't know you loved me. I'm sorry about the bird, too. Malarac nudged Beliana a couple times before he started to cry. Tears weren't common where he came from, and he'd only made them once before, when his older brother poked him in the eye with a claw. That hardly counted. Hot and wet, they trailed down Mary's cheeks. He didn't want to be in the woman's body anymore. He wanted out. He wanted his friend to wake up, and he wanted her to scold him like she always did. He'd messed things up like he always did. I think you killed her, he sobbed out. Sam leaned in to stare at the bird. I'm sorry, Mary, he repeated. The crow stirred, flapping its wings in a weak way. It tried to regain its balance, and Malarac set it on the floor. Beliana, he whispered. Chapter 5. Belliana stretched out her left wing and then her right. With each move, the poor beast's pain stung the angel to her core. She bent her knees, wiggled her clawed toes, and thanked God nothing was broken, just bruises that would soon heal. Leaving a host with injuries was a serious ethical breach. Even though getting smacked against the wall wasn't exactly her fault, she had an uncomfortable feeling that the Most High wouldn't be entirely happy with the circumstances. He had an uncanny ability to make even the best excuses look flimsy, and she didn't have a good one to start with. Why, she asked herself, why do I keep trying to help that wretch Malarak when all I get is grief and pain? No wonder the rule book discourages associating with demons any more than your task demands. The damn things are nothing but trouble, not worth the few lousy points I get for trying to give him guidance. She opened her eyes to see Mary's face inches away, tears running down her cheeks. "Eliana," the woman whispered, "I'm sorry. I never wanted you to get hurt." A disgruntled squawk slipped out before Belliana could stop it. She raised up her head and poked her beak into the woman's ear. With a cautious glance up at Sam, deathly pale and still clutching Mary's shoulders, she hissed in the ear as quietly as she could. "You're forgiven, Malarak. Now get out of her." Mary jumped back into Sam so hard that the young man tripped over his own feet and crashed to the floor, with the woman landing on his stomach. He let out an enormous grunt and tried to push her away, but she wasn't going anywhere. She sat frozen in place, eyes wide, jaw slack, pointing at the bird. Belliana ignored the pain in her wings and flitted to the kitchen counter, where she perched. Why had Mary jumped back, terrified? The awful truth hit her like a lightning bolt. Either Mary had regained awareness by her own force of will, or Malarak had let her surface for his own purpose. Whichever it was, demon and human were living together in the woman's head. Waking up to a foreign voice in her mind must have been shocking, and now, as if that wasn't bad enough, the poor woman had just heard a wounded bird whisper forgiveness and demand that Malarak get out. Blast! If he left her traumatized, he'd be double damned and deserve it. Sam put both hands on the back of Mary's butt and pushed, wriggling his legs at the same time. She slid down his body, still rigid, her arm pointing at the bird. When she cleared his knees, he gave one final shove and climbed out from under her. That broke the trance. Her arm fell to her lap and her mouth closed, though her eyes darted wildly back and forth around the room. Sam scooted across the floor to sit beside her and slipped his arm over her shoulders. When the woman's entire body trembled in a single gigantic shiver, he pulled her close. "That bird talked to me," she croaked, her voice thick. "Shh," he whispered, running a finger down her cheek to wipe away a tear. "No, I mean it. That bird talked to me." Belliana let out a soft squawk. The woman didn't cower, so she squawked again, louder this time. She had their attention now, so she threw back her head and gave it all she had. "Awk! Pretty bird, you're forgiven. Now get out. Pretty bird, want a cracker. You're forgiven. Now get out. Want a cracker. Awk!" Sam's eyes went wide. "Wow, neat. You were right. Somebody taught it to talk." He jumped up, leaving Mary sitting on the floor, and ran to a cupboard where he grabbed a little brown bag. He reached in and pulled out a peanut. "Here, give it this," he said, dropping the nut into Mary's hand. Belliana felt something stir in her host. She had pushed the bird's mind down pretty hard, but the sight of the peanut woke up an avian instinct deeper than anything an angel could touch. She gave in and flitted across the room. The urge to dive-bomb Mary's hand and snatch the peanut was almost overwhelming, but she fought it down and settled on Mary's leg. Mary held out her hand, palm up. The bird's neck muscles trembled when the scent reached its nostrils, and Belliana struggled to keep it from snatching the nut and flying away with its prize. Very slowly, with utmost delicacy, she stretched forward and took the nut in her beak. The bird crunched down on the nut and swallowed. A wave of sheer ecstasy raced through its body as the salty, oily, aromatic treat covered its tongue and filled its craw. Its gut reacted to the new food, rumbling and pushing out the foul remnants of her last meal. "Shit!" Mary slapped the bird away and sprang up. "That bird just... Beliana flitted back to her perch on the dresser, embarrassed beyond belief. Mary was staring at a thick mass of brown and white goop running down the front of her dress. Sam dashed to the sink and rummaged in a drawer. "Shut up!" Mary stamped her foot. "It's not funny." Sam held out a rag. "I'm not laughing." "I don't mean you." "Who do you mean?" Sam looked around the room. "The bird?" "No," she sighed. "Never mind. You wouldn't understand." She dabbed at the dropping, managing to smear more of it than she had got off, and held out the messy rag to Sam. "I need to change. Have you got some decent clothes I can wear?" "Sure." He led the way to his bedroom and pointed to the closet. "Take whatever you want." "Hey, Mary." He touched her cheek. "You okay?" "Yeah, sorry to be so much trouble." She looked down at the floor. "I just need some time alone with my thoughts." "Sure." He gave her a long, searching stare before turning around and leaving the room, closing the door behind him. Beliana perched on top of the dresser. Mary cast a dismissive glance at the bird and pulled the dress over her head. After tossing it on the floor, she rummaged through Sam's closet and grabbed a pair of jeans. "I don't believe you," she snapped. She held the pants in the air, scowling at the faded knees. "You're lying." Beliana's little heart pounded. Had Malarak lost his mind? What was he doing, talking to his host? There'd be hell to pay, for sure. And what was he telling her? She hopped off the dresser and flitted to the bed, closer to the girl. "Get away from me, you stupid bird!" she shouted, flailing her hand at it as it flew by. She paused and stared at the wall with a vacant expression. "No way! I know what you are. You're a sick voice in my head, and pretty soon you're going to tell me to kill somebody. But I won't. You're a disease, and I hate you, so just shut up." Sam knocked on the door. "Mary, are you okay? Who are you talking to?" "Nobody. Leave me alone." She licked her lips. I'm sorry. I'm upset, is all." Beliana flew to the closet, snatched a plaid cotton shirt off a hanger, and dropped it in Mary's lap. The girl looked at the shirt, looked at the bird, looked back at the shirt, and shook her head. Muttering something unintelligible under her breath, she rammed one arm in the sleeve and then the other, and set to buttoning it with fierce determination, ignoring the fact that she was off by one button, making the shirt hang askew and baggy off her shoulders. She stood and threw the pants on. The moment she let go, they dropped to her knees. She yanked them back up, found a belt in the closet, and cinched the pants tight around her waist. "That better?" she grumbled to the bird. Beliana turned her head to get a better look at the girl. She was standing tall and seemed in control, but tears were welling up in her eyes, ready to follow in the tracks of some that had already run down her cheeks. Suddenly she blushed, a brilliant crimson that made her cheeks and ears glow. "I will not do that! Are you nuts?" she shouted, and then clapped a hand over her mouth. You, she stammered, gulping over and over. "You have no power over me, because I know what you are. You're a disease. I've got..." She sat down on the bed and stared straight at the bird. "Wait a minute. If I had a mental disease, I wouldn't know, would I? But I know I'm sick, so I really can't be, right?" Beliana paced to the corner of the dresser, turned around, and paced back. She let out a quiet squawk to catch Mary's attention. "You're not sick," she said, hoping and praying that it was the right thing to do. By now, she knew she was in so far over her head that the rules didn't apply anymore. Mary sat back down on the edge of the bed, adjusted her crooked collar, folded her hands in her lap, and addressed the bird. "Excuse me, what did you say?" Belliana flitted off the dresser and perched on the corner of the bed, tilting her head back. "I said you're not sick. You're possessed by a demon. I can help you get rid of it." Mary nodded. "Oh, that's okay then. The bird says, no problem. I'm only possessed by a demon, and she can help." She sniffled, gulped a couple of times, took a deep breath, and screamed, "Sam!" He burst into the room and looked all around, eyes wide. "What?" She pointed at the bird, her finger trembling. Tell Sam what you said." Belliana flew to the dresser, where she shifted her weight back and forth from one foot to the other. "Ah!" She hopped up and down a few times. "Ah! Pretty bird, Malarak, get out now! Now! Get out now! Ah! Want a cracker!" Sam sat down beside Mary and took her hand in his. "Get out now? What a peculiar thing for a bird to say! I wonder who taught it that." A tear rolled down Mary's cheek, and then another. Sam brushed them away with the back of his finger, and that's all it took for the dam to burst. She let out a piteous wail and buried her face in his chest, sobbing. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and held her close. When she finally calmed, he kissed the top of her head and pushed her away. "I called my boss," he said. "I am taking the morning off. Let's get you home." She nodded and stood up, still shaking. Sam picked the dress up from the floor and took her hand. They shuffled to the kitchen. He held the dirty corner of the dress under the faucet, wiped it clean with a paper towel, folded it, and slid it in a grocery bag. Mary watched the whole process, frozen in place, silent. "I can drive," he said, "but maybe the walk would do you good. Are you up for it?" "Sam," she pursed her lips, "can a person go crazy all of a sudden? Like, one minute she's fine, and the next minute she's whacked?" "Huh? I don't know. Maybe, I suppose. If they're really stressed, it might build up and then let go all at once." "Why?" She shook her head. "What do you mean, stressed?" He held her hand, tucked the bag with the dress under his arm, and led her out into the warm air, shoving the door closed behind them with his shoulder. They walked in silence for a while until he kicked a pebble and sent it flying. "Stress," he said, speaking slowly, "might happen if you were married to someone you didn't love, and who didn't love you, or respect you, or value you." He kicked another pebble. "I'd hate that, wouldn't you?" She let go of his hand and tugged up her pants. "But what if you couldn't do anything about it? What if you had to stay married because, for a million reasons?" "Well then," he took aim at a small rock at the side of the road and gave it a fearsome kick, sending it flying so hard it ricocheted off a tree and fell with a plop in the ditch beside the road. "I suppose in that case I'd go crazy, wouldn't you?" Malarak had enough of the foot dragging. "Just kiss him and get it over with. That's what you humans do." Mary sighed. She tried to ignore the invasive voice that insisted she do things she shouldn't, but the truth was she wanted to kiss Sam. She wasn't happy at all. She couldn't remember the last time, or if there even was a time, she had smiled with her husband. "Yeah, maybe you're right." "Of course I am," the demon insisted. Sam reached over and took Mary's hand. He squeezed it and smiled, looking sheepish. "Kiss him." With a groan, she started walking. "Well, what should I do about this stress I have? Do you have any ideas?" Sam kept up, still clutching her hand in his. He swallowed so hard his throat clicked and kept his eyes on the way ahead. "I guess if it is the stress of, well, those things I mentioned, you ought to find a way to make it better." "How?" They were close to her house. She didn't want to go in there yet, More than anything, Mary wanted to go back to Sam's house and sit on his couch for a while to get a grip. He stared at her patchy lawn, frowning. The silence went on and on. She knew the answer she wanted to hear, but he refused to say it. When he didn't even meet her anxious gaze, she gave up and walked to her door. Without saying a word, she wrenched it open and slammed it behind her. The voice in her mind groaned with frustration. Chapter 6. Beliana flapped harder, trying to catch up to the couple. "Curse me for befriending that demon! I'll get him for meddling like this!" She noticed a fat orange cat chasing her across the fence alongside Mary's backyard and closing fast. She had to hurry and looked for an open window. The crow's body felt weak from the injury in Sam's house. Almost to the front door, she glanced back just as the cat leaped. The crow's body collided with something, and the angel reeled as her spirit blew out of its avian host in an automatic leap to safety. Beliana screeched, and her voice came out in a manly wail of startled pain. She opened her eyes and looked at the cat on her chest with a crow in its mouth. "Oh, no, you don't!" She reached up and took hold of the feline to pry its mouth open. The crow, dazed and confused, flapped across the unkept lawn for a few moments before it finally gained control of its faculties and took to the air. The cat hissed and swiped at Beliana's new host with sharp claws. The thin red lines it cut into her skin burned. "Great," she muttered. "Now, where am I?" She let the cat go and stood, brushing herself off, only to notice that she was a he, and the clothes he had on looked very familiar. A bag lay nearby with Mary's dress hanging half out of it. "Oh, no!" Beliana shouted, realizing whose body she'd jumped into. This was not supposed to happen. She closed his eyes and tried to leave him, but her soul and his had melded into one. "Not good at all!" She bent to pick up the bag, furious. "Malarak, this is all your fault!" Marching up the steps, he pounded on the front door. "You get out here right now!" Mary's voice answered from the depths of the house. "Go away, Sam! My whole life is a wreck! Just leave me alone!" Beliana gripped the door handle and turned. It wasn't locked. He pulled it open and stepped inside. "Malarak!" Mary stood in the hall, looking bewildered. Beliana shut the door and strode inside, tossing the bag on the kitchen table. "All right, this has to stop. You have to—" Mary rushed forward, grabbed Sam's shoulders, and planted a sloppy kiss over his mouth. Thrown off guard, the angel stumbled backward and fell, breaking the kiss. Sam's head slammed against the edge of the table, causing stars to twinkle in his field of vision. Mary landed atop him, and the male body hosting the angel came alive with need and heat. Beliana flushed and turned away. "Stop that, Malarak! It's not right!" "What? Is that you, Beliana?" Mary's voice said. "I'm sorry. I thought you were Sam. I was trying to get these two back together, like they should be. How did you get in there? I didn't think you were allowed. Oh, don't worry about Mary finding out you're in Sam. I got so carried away a minute ago that I pushed her down hard. She's sleeping right now. Want me to clue her in?" "No!" The angel helped the woman off his body and scooted further away, overwhelmed by the ticklish sensation between his legs. Whoa, this is bad. You have to get out of her body right now." She shook his hands and frowned. "And I have to get out of Sam's." "So, get out." Malarak sat up and crossed Mary's legs. He picked at the nails on one hand with a bored expression. I can't. It's like I'm stuck in here." Mary's laughter didn't make Belliana feel any better. "It's not funny." Malarac stretched her arms high and yawned. "Well, the kiss was nice." "It was not." Horrified at his ease over their predicament, Belliana stood and paced the kitchen. "None of this is supposed to happen. You shouldn't be able to possess a human and not get out. I'm not even supposed to be in him." Mary crossed her arms and clicked her tongue. "Demons possess humans all the time. It's not that big a deal." "Then get out." "You know I can't. I've tried. Maybe this is supposed to happen. Maybe this is bigger than Mary and Sam. Maybe, just maybe, this is about us." "Us? Us? There is no us. I'm an angel. You're a demon. I don't know what you're thinking." Again Malarac advanced, arms outstretched, her dress more askew than before, and her eyes narrowed with longing. She took hold of Sam and nuzzled her face against his. "It feels right to me." Warm kisses swept across Sam's face, and soft lips settled on his ear. Malarac whispered, "Kiss me back." "Are you insane?" Belliana took hold of Mary's shoulders to keep her in place and stepped away. "What's gotten into you? You've lost your senses." The tears welling in Mary's eyes gave Belliana pause. A thick feeling of guilt filled Sam's chest and made it hard to breathe. "Oh," was all she could say, at a sudden loss for words to reprimand the demon with. Things must have gotten out of hand a long time ago if Malarac was acting like this now. "You always try to make me do the right things," Malarac said, Mary's voice hitching. "You always try to make me be like you, and maybe you're right. Maybe I should try to be good, but it's not that easy for me. I'm not like you. I'm not an angel, and I never will be." He batted at Belliana's hands to escape and skulked away. "You don't like me at all. I'm just one of your pity cases, someone to watch and not really get close to. I get it now. I see how it is for you." Malarac pouted and sniffled and walked down the hall toward the bedroom. "Well," he said in a choked voice, "just go away and leave me be. I'm better off alone. Tomorrow, if I'm still in Mary's body, I'm going back to the convent, back to my duties. The kid can go to a foster home or something. I can't do anything right. You've said that to me so many times, and I never believed it." She stopped in the doorway, her shoulders slumped and tears streaming down her face. "And if Sister Maggie can help me out of Mary's body, I'm going to apply for the opening in the incubus department. I might as well do something more interesting than taunting nuns with mass market porn." Belliana had never seen Malarac looking as sad as this before now. Sam's heart skipped a beat. She searched for something to say, some way to comfort the demon she'd been watching over for so many years, but realized Malarac was right this time. She thought she had seen him for himself and not just for points, but now she realized she never had. He was far more than a soul that needed guidance. He was searching for true love. Malarac whispered, "Just go away," and shut the bedroom door softly. Stunned, Belliana stood there, unsure of what to do next. The phone rang finally, giving a reason to move. She felt numb and lost. Picking up the avocado green receiver, she said, "Hello," and plopped down onto the seat by the kitchen table. "Who is this?" The voice of Mary's husband on the line made a cold shiver. "This is Sam. This is Sam." "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The angel really didn't feel like dealing with the drunkard at that moment. There was enough going on as it was, and patience wasn't at the top of her mind. Look, your wife never loved you, and you never loved her. Why don't you go down to city court and file for a divorce, okay? Bad enough how you ignore her and treat her like a piece of furniture. It felt good to tell it to him point blank, real good. For years she'd watched the man take advantage of his situation and virtually ignore his wife and her son. Divorce? You heard me. Do something right for a change, you jerk. Beliana placed the phone on the hook and sighed. Eric would be getting home from school in an hour. The boy mustn't see his mother like this. Something had to be done. But what? To take her mind off the present, she set to work cleaning up the house. She did the dishes, wiped down the sparkly gold 70s counter, and set the table. The kitchen floor got a sweep and mop. The living room received a thorough dusting and vacuuming. At 3:10, Beliana knocked on Mary's bedroom door. Hey, Mallorak, I'm going to go pick up Eric at the bus stop, okay? No one answered, but he heard a sniffle and the mattress creaked. Beliana left the house, still at a loss. She walked along the road, staring at the way ahead. At the corner where the bus would eventually drop off a little boy she had no desire to explain things to, she waited. He's my son, a masculine voice thought, so let me explain it to him. All right, Sam, the angel said aloud. That's probably best. The orange bus creaked to a stop. Eric bounded down the steps and stood on the sidewalk, staring up at Sam. Beliana let the man have control over his mind. She felt like a helpless watcher, forced to witness this first-time meeting. Sam knelt down. Hi, Eric. You don't know me, but... Yeah, I know who you are. The boy adjusted his backpack. Hi, Dad. He said it without sarcasm, without any inflection of anger at all, and the angel was surprised. I was wondering when I'd get to meet you. You know about me? Eric nodded and started for the house. Mom talks to herself a lot. I think she's a little off sometimes, but mainly that's because of the guy she married. Maybe you could come by and talk to her. I think she kicked him out last night. She came by my place today, Sam explained. I always wanted to meet you, but I didn't want to interfere. I'm sorry. Eric nodded, shuffling his feet. So, you gonna come over or what? All right, Sam answered. But just so you know, she's been pretty upset today. I haven't seen your mom for years. I'm not sure if this is how she usually is. She cries a lot when she thinks no one's looking. Eric started ahead, frowning. Sam hurried to catch up. The two walked up the drive to the steps. The boy laid a hand on the doorknob. Mom's got some issues, is all. She tries her best. He offered a youthful smile and pushed his way inside. Hey, Mom, I'm home. Sam hesitated, and for the first time, Beliana nudged him mentally. Well, go on. Who knows if you'll ever get this chance again? I've watched you for as long as I've watched over Mary. You love her. Take a chance. Adrenaline and insecurity rushed through Sam's body, affecting him and Beliana as well. He took a step forward, then another. Soon he stood in the kitchen again, rubbing at the lump on his forehead from where he'd bumped into the table. Mom! Eric shouted. The boy pounded on her bedroom door. Hey, I need to talk to you about Dad, my real dad. Can you come out? Even from the kitchen, Beliana heard Mary crying. The child lowered his voice and spoke in a more coaxing manner until the door creaked open. Looking disheveled, Mary came out into the kitchen, holding her son's hand. Sam's fear made his body quiver. It's a lot to hit me with in one day, he thought. A son, my own child. I've missed all these years already. And Mary, how could she keep the secret of her love from me for so long? Sensing his hesitation, Beliana pushed Sam's conscience to the back and took over. Mary, he began, I think you and I need to see more of each other. We have Eric, and I want to be part of his life, of your life. I want things to change. I think you and I... Mary wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Yeah, but what about us, Angel? Meliana stepped back, dismayed. It was Malarak in control of the woman now. Had Mary heard anything Sam said at all? Chapter 7. The telephone rang. Nobody moved until Eric took a step toward it, and then Mary dived for it and grabbed the receiver. Yes, Harold, it's me. She slapped her palm over the phone and hissed. Demon, I'm sick of you butting in. Just shut up and stay out of this. It's my business, not yours. Eric looked around in confusion because she'd spoken to the ceiling with her eyes closed. Yes, Harold, Sam did answer my phone. She let out a long, deep sigh. Yes, he's still here. Harold? Harold, are you there? Hello? She held the receiver to her ear for a few seconds before hanging up and kneeling in front of the boy. Eric, I think you need to go play at Teddy's house for a while. I'll come get you later, okay? He's mad, isn't he? He's coming over here to beat up my real daddy. Mary rolled her eyes. Come on, let's get your clothes changed so you can go play. Eric wrinkled his nose at her and stomped off to his bedroom. When he reappeared a minute later, carrying a baseball glove, he walked past everyone without a word and let himself out the front door. His mother stood at the kitchen window and watched him trudge down the street, kicking stones along the way. Mary sat down at the kitchen table and closed her eyes. Okay, demon, or whatever you are, here's the deal. I need to handle this myself. She cocked her head to the side for a few seconds and then slammed her fist on the table. No, I get that you're just trying to help, and you know what? I might even be grateful for what you've done so far, but you're finished now. I'll take it from here. Comprende? Stay out of it. She listened for a few more seconds before jumping up so fast that the chair crashed to the floor. She ran to the kitchen cupboard and rummaged through the spice rack. Yeah? Well, I know how to get rid of you. I just remembered. It was in a movie I saw, and I bet it'll work. She held up a jar, unscrewed the lid, dumped a bunch of powder into her palm, and snorted the whole pile. A black cloud shot out her nose as she went into a fit of sneezing over and over until she collapsed in another chair, gasping for breath. A horrendous mewling rent the air from outside the kitchen window. The same old tomcat that had attacked the crow not long ago leaped into view on the windowsill and then down onto the kitchen floor, where it rolled and writhed, clawing at its face. It finally stopped and glared up at Mary. That hurt like hell, you know. Yeah? Well, consider yourself warned. Mary waved the jar of pepper. You invade my brain again, and I'll do twice as much next time. The cat locked eyes with her in a fierce staring contest for a few seconds before lowering its gaze and nonchalantly wiping its face with a front paw. A crunching of gravel in the drive made everyone look at one another and then at the door. It exploded open and Harold strode in. His midnight black hair stuck out from both sides of his head as if he'd been tearing at it during the drive over, and a vein on his neck pulsed furiously. He glanced at Sam, but focused on Mary as he marched up to her, breathing hard. It dawned on Beliana that Mary was a mess. Despite spending a good part of the day in the bedroom, she still hadn't put on a bra, and the misbuttoned shirt of Sam's she'd put on hung out of his baggy jeans in a way that made it look like she'd thrown it on in seconds. Harold scowled in silence at his wife, perusing her from head to toe, his fists clenching and unclenching at his side. Eventually he let out a throaty growl and turned to Sam. What the hell are you doing in my house with my wife? Eliana cowered inside Sam's head. Nobody had ever addressed her that way before. She was working up the courage to apologize and say she was just on her way out when Sam spoke up. "Mary is the mother of my child. I have the right." "The hell you do, if I ever see you nosing around here again." Mary stepped between them. "Harold, I love Sam, and I want him to take his place as the father of my child." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "I want a divorce, and I want you to pack your things and get out of here today. I'm sick of your drinking and staying out all night. I'm sick of us living off your father's money because you can't hold a job, and I'm sick of you ignoring me and my son." His jaw slowly dropped. Leaning forward to thrust his face close to hers, he took a deep breath. "Now you listen to me, you ungrateful bitch. If you think you're going to make a fool out of me in front of my family and friends, you're crazy. Get out of my way. I have business with someone." He put both hands on her shoulders and shoved her aside. She stumbled, tripped on the overturned chair, and sprawled on the floor, clutching her arm. Sam jumped toward her to help, but Harold grabbed his wrist and spun him around. He pulled back his fist and took an enormous swing at Sam. Beliana saw it coming and made herself as small as possible, but the blow sent her consciousness spinning. Everything after that passed by in a confused blur. Strong fingers grasped at Sam's throat and drove him back against the wall. An orange ball of wild fur crashed into the picture, squalling and flaying its claws at Harold's face. The grip on Sam's throat loosened and fell away. Throaty screams came from a heap of man and cat thrashing on the floor. The cat flew through the air and crashed into a wall as Harold roared. A thud rang out in the kitchen, and his yell died. Silence at last filled the room. Sam struggled to sit up. Harold lay on the floor, while Mary stood over him, grasping a heavy metal vase. Already a red and purple lump was rising on Harold's forehead. Without taking her eyes off him, she picked up the phone and dialed the police. Beliana looked around and spotted the tomcat lying in a heap in the corner of the room. She rushed over and stroked it, feeling for a pulse. Mary gave her address to the police and hung up. She joined Sam, kneeling beside the cat. "It mustn't die," Beliana whispered. Mary touched the cat's head, tickling it under the ears. "It saved your life, didn't it, Sam? And maybe mine. Who would think a demon would do that?" "Malarak is special. I've always thought of him as an angel who got born on the wrong side of the tracks." "What?" Mary rubbed a wisp of hair out of her eyes. "You know it? And its name?" I hate to tell you this, but Sam's not alone in here. My name is Beliana." Mary took a deep breath and bit her lip. "Okay, I can deal with this. Sam's got a demon too." She chuckled and glanced around the room as if checking for spirits floating about. "No problem. I guess lots of people have demons living in their heads, huh?" "I'm not a demon. I'm an angel. Your guardian angel." "Really? My guardian angel?" She waved her arm around the wrecked room. "Nice job. You're new at this, right?" "We'll talk about that later. Right now, we've got to take care of the cat." "Of course." She stroked the critter's head. "We owe this old guy a lot. Or the demon. Both, I suppose." Beliana lowered her voice. "If a host dies, the spirit dies too. It's the ultimate punishment for a spirit who's responsible for the death of its host." "What? After he saved our lives? That's not fair. He wasn't responsible. Harold did it, not the demon." "You'd be surprised how many things in life aren't fair. But that's the way it is. It's not our place to argue." Mary leaned down closer and peered into the beast's eyes. "Can't the demon just leave and go somewhere else?" Belliana shook her head. Not when the host is unconscious. You mean, Mary gulped, you mean the demon attacked Harold to save us, knowing he could die? He was ready to give his life for us? He's not your ordinary demon. Mary stayed perfectly still, staring down at the cat. Then we've got to get it to the vet. She scooped up the animal and ran to the door just as 3 policemen arrived. He tried to kill us, she panted, tilting her head toward Harold. We've got to get our cat to the vet. He tried to kill it, too. One of the policemen touched Harold's neck and made a call on his walkie-talkie. He looked up. I called it in. An ambulance is coming. You 2 go with them to the vet and take their story. I'll wait here. One of the policemen nodded. Come on, I'll give you a ride. Mary held the cat on her lap, cradled in her arms, and stroked its rich orange fur while she and Sam took turns telling the story to the officer in the front seat. The police dropped them at the office, and they handed the cat to one of the vet's assistants. Belliana made herself as inconspicuous as possible while Mary and Sam waited in the reception room. More than once, she felt tempted to put words into the poor guy's mouth when he couldn't find them for himself. But she fought the urge. He needed to do this himself. A rush of warmth surged through her being when Mary's fingers wrapped around his and drew his hand into her lap. A moment later, Mary slid as close as the chairs allowed and rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes closed. Nothing more needed to be said. They came out of their trance when the assistant appeared and asked them to follow her back to the examination room. The cat lay on a stainless steel table, its head wrapped round and round in a white bandage. Its eyes followed them as they entered, and it let out a deep rumbling purr when Mary stroked its head. Your cat suffered a concussion. It'll have to spend the night, but it should be good as new in the morning. Sam smiled at the young woman. Thank you. May we be alone with him for a minute? She nodded and left, closing the door. Mary squatted down so she could put her face up close to the cat's. What's your name, demon? Malarak. Well, Malarak, I want to say thanks. You risked your life to save us. The cat opened its mouth wide and yawned, showing worn yellow teeth and a wrinkled old tongue. Oh, it was nothing. The least I could do after all the trouble I caused. Trouble? Malarak, I can never repay you for what you've done. But one thing I don't understand is why you didn't just hop into Harold's head and make him stop. Why did you take a chance on dying by staying in the cat? You have no idea. I wanted to hop into that SOB's head and make him go play in the freeway, but I guess I learned the hard way that interfering like that doesn't work out. I had to stay clear of him and let him do his own thing, dig his own grave, you might say. Mary looked up at Sam. Angel, is there any way I can put in a good word for Malarak? You don't need to. I'm sure the boss already knows. He seems to know everything that goes on. As a matter of fact, if I were a betting angel, I'd lay stiff odds that he arranged the sticking thing all along for his own purpose. Sometimes he's got plans that don't make sense right away, but turn out wonderful in the end. Okay. She turned back to the cat and touched her nose to his. You know what, Malarak? I can't just leave you here in this old tomcat body. You want to ride home with me? The cat's eyes opened wide. Really? You're serious? You'd let me back into your head? Yep. Wait a minute. You've got to promise no more pepper. That stuff is hell. I guess you'd know. So I promise no more pepper as long as you behave. Deal? The cat raised its paw and smacked her hand. Deal. Sam's eyes flickered back and forth between Mary and the minister so many times that Belliana felt a touch nauseous. Or maybe it was the whole till death do us part thing. She'd never dealt with that concept before. Mary poked Sam in the ribs. Well, do you? Oh, yeah, I do. Everyone in the congregation chuckled, and Belliana added her own quiet, I do, to Sam's thoughts. And do you, Mary, take Sam to be your lawful wedded husband until death do you part? I do. She closed her eyes and moved her lips. Well, how about you, Demon? After a second or two, she whispered, I would hope so, and winked at Sam. The minister gave her a funny look and smiled. Then I pronounce you man and wife. Mary sat down on the bed, and Sam sat beside her. He stroked her head, pulling her hair back behind her shoulder, and touched his lips to her ear. The last time we did this, he murmured, we were in a bit of a rush. Maybe this time we could take it slower. No way, she grumbled and covered his mouth with a slobbery kiss. Let's get it on. Remember, I work convents. I've never done this before, and I'm horny as hell. Mary sucked in her breath and glared at the ceiling. Malarac, you just shut up and butt out. This is my show. She smiled and nodded. That's better. Remember, you promised to behave. Touching Sam's face, she whispered, Now, where were we? Just a minute. I need to check something. He closed his eyes. Angel, are you sure you want to hang around for this? I could try the pepper treatment if you want. I mean, you being an angel, well, you know, you're not embarrassed or anything. Belliana chuckled in her sweet, angelic way and touched Sam's mind. Hey, like the demon said, let's get this show on the road. The night is short. Good point. He slid his arm behind Mary's back, found the gown zipper, and slowly drew it down.